This is the deep dive into page 1 of the 2025 Oklahoma residential sales contract. So at the top of the first page, we're going to see the property identifier. This is going to be on the top of every page, and it is the postal address of the property that the buyers are trying to purchase. If there's not a postal address, you can put the legal in there, totally fine, but typically it's going to be the mailing address of the property. The contract is defined by the pages of the contract and the attachments that are checked in the next section. So if there's any sort of financing addendums, those need to be checked and attached to the contract. If you're going to do proof of funds or attach a pre-qualification letter, you'll check that as well. If there's homeowners association, condo association, any sort of documents like that that the buyer needs to be aware of or that we need to request from the seller, mark those. If there's a contingency, it's really important that we make sure that the contingency document is attached and the correct one is attached. So if the buyer's property is already under contract and the contingency is just that it closes, that's one form. If they don't have their property listed yet and it's not under contract, that's a different form. So we need to make sure that you're using the correct form and that you check that those forms are going to be attached to protect the buyer. If the buyer is asking the seller to pay for your compensation on the purchase of the property, make sure you attach the cooperative compensation supplement. There have been some realtors out there that have ended up working for free because they forgot to attach that sheet and didn't want to go after the buyer for it. So make sure if the buyer is having the seller pay their compensation, that that's attached. And then another thing, just a personal pet peeve of mine, please don't type cash there. The contract defaults as a cash contract unless there's a finance addendum attached. So just don't type cash. Don't do that. No, don't. Okay. The seller's names are going to be in county records typically. So you'll look up their names in the county assessor. If there's 2 or 3 owners, type their names in. If it's a trust or held corporately, put in the name of the trust or the name of the corporation that owns the property. The buyer's names you're going to get off of the pre-approval letter. So if the buyers are approved to purchase the property under just James' name or just Dolly's name, then you will only put the name that's on the pre-approval on the contract. It's not saying that we're cutting anybody out of the transaction. It's just to keep things simple for the lender. We want the buyer's name to match whatever they have on their approval. Then we're going to get down on the little bit further on the first page. Pay attention to what is in bold on the paragraph on the top. It says all prior verbal and written negotiations, representations, and agreements are superseded by the contract and may only be modified or assigned by further written agreement of the buyer and seller. So this means that if the buyer and seller got together after the realtors scattered to go to the paperwork and made some verbal agreements in the driveway, it doesn't matter. If it's not in the contract, it didn't happen. If the MLS says that the refrigerator is going to convey with the property, but it's not in the contract, the refrigerator is not going to convey. So all other previous verbal or written negotiations, they need to be put in writing in the purchase contract or they don't exist. So make sure that if there is something else that's been talked about or if there's something in the MLS that needs to be included in the contract, just do one more quick glance through the MLS and make sure that you've added it in here. So the property is going to consist of the real property located in the county that the property is located in. Then you're going to fill out the legal description. If it's lengthy, you can do an addendum for a lengthy legal. But a lot of times, especially in town, it's going to be lot block addition to the city of whatever the city is. Then we need to have the property address. Make sure that the property address matches what the postal service has for their mailing address. That has been throwing lenders lately. Underwriters want to make sure that if it's 931 Thomas Jefferson Parkway, that we have that full 931 Thomas Jefferson Parkway written in here, and that it doesn't get confused with Thomas Jefferson Street, Thomas Jefferson Avenue, Boulevard, anything else. So just make sure that that matches what the post office shows, because they will compare the two and make sure that they have the right property. And then the purchase price and source of funds, this is again where it says that it's a cash transaction unless there's a financing supplement attached. And then you put in the purchase price payable to the seller by a delivery of earnest money to the title company, and then loans that are going to be covered through the addendums attached. Typically, we see 1% earnest money, but that's negotiable. That is not anything that's set in stone. So for a $225,000 purchase, $2,500 would be totally fine. $2,000 would be totally fine. They could do $1,000 if that's what they wanted to do. On VA, a lot of times the VA lenders will recommend only putting $500 down, because otherwise the veteran ends up getting cash back at closing. So just pay attention to the type of loan that you're using, and use the earnest money amount as part of your strategy and negotiations. And then remember that at Epic Realty, all earnest money is held at the title company. So the buyer and or buyer's agent are going to be responsible for getting the earnest money to the title company and getting that receipt turned in to the lender. Title should have it, but then the cooperating broker as well. And then at the bottom of page 1, we've got the closing date, and that's an on or before date. So if you think you can have it done by December 24th, but that's going to be pushing it, it doesn't hurt anything to have December 31st as your closing date, just to give yourself a little extra cushion there if needed. And then we're going to have the buyers and sellers initial the bottoms of all the pages. And this is even if there's a counter. The buyers and sellers will initial the bottom of each page, but they won't sign the last page if they counter. So that's the end of page 1, and we'll jump over to page 2.